My name is Christina Merrill. In 2017, my now ex-husband literally unalived me in front of my children. As a result, I enlisted the help of North Carolina, not only Anson and Union County Sheriff's Departments, which thank you to them, but as well as the courts, etc., to protect myself and my children. They did everything they could do, but when that protection did not work, then I had no choice and I was forced to find a way, after being raped, after having my house broken into, and there are sheriff's affidavits, etc., that I will include with this to prove that I'm telling the truth. But after they began to indict him, the DA from Anson County called the DA in Union County to organize that process, but after he found out he was being indicted on attempted vehicular felony manslaughter charges for the 5-inch open skull fracture, brain injury, resulting 3 months old I was, etc. And once again, I want to remind you, he did that in front of my children. After finding out he was being indicted, he and his family, who acts the same way that he does, they literally chased my children and I out of the state. I went to Kentucky. I had a veteran friend of mine that is a very good man who offered to let my children and I stay in his 4-bedroom house until we got back on our feet. There are other things around that, but they concern him, so I will not be including that part in this. But I will tell you this: I self-reported to CPS in Kentucky. Not only did I self-report, but I had my protective order transferred from North Carolina to Kentucky. I did that in Madisonville, Kentucky, in Hopkins County. All I have to say is from that point on, my life became a living hell. Every institution that you're supposed to expect to protect you did not protect my children or myself. In fact, what it did was exploit the brain injury that man had given me as a way to take my children. And it was done illegally, and I can prove that. So as a result of trying to protect myself and protect my children, self-reporting to Adult Protective Services and Child Protective Services, going to the judge and presenting my evidence, all I have to say is that there was no protection. Under ADA 2010, I had the rights to be dealt with according to my disability, which I now have because of the individual that did this to me in the first place. And not only did the courts not do that, but they exploited it. It left me with an inability to properly communicate, and that was the primary thing that they used, besides my CPTSD, to exploit me, to be able to take my children. Because if you're an abuse victim in the state of Kentucky and you cannot financially defend yourself, if you cannot verbally defend yourself, if you cannot find counsel that is willing to defend you, etc., and I want to say to that, I had a couple of good lawyers, and you know exactly who you are, that tried to defend me. But if you don't have those things in place, Kentucky takes advantage of you as a domestic violence victim. As I began to learn how to try and defend myself, since I wasn't getting the defense I needed in court, because the courts don't work legally, they don't work according to, if you want to put it into legal terms, it would be deprivation of rights under color of law, 1983 Monell. But anyway, as that took place, I began to do my research into this county and each of the players inside of it that were involved in my case. And I found that not only was I not the only one, but I found 140 other families who had dealt with what I was dealing with. I began to not only try to advocate for myself, but I began to also try to advocate for them. At that time, I spoke to anybody who would listen to the best of my ability. And although I wasn't able to accomplish what I needed to by being heard, I found that there was a reason for that. The systems that are in place to oversee not only the court systems, but CPS, the sheriff's department, etc., they don't oversee them. It is a very well-oiled machine. And when you have one person like myself who is speaking out against an entire system, the system eventually gets tired of it and comes after you instead. All I ever tried to do was protect my children. I was told by these courts that if I did not agree to the Alford, which I was told was a not guilty plea, by the way, that I would probably never see my children again. That was the first time. The second time, and you have to understand, at that time I was very much under duress, and if you coerce me into intimidation style, including my attorney at that time, into believing that if I do not take a guilty plea, then I will never see my kids again, then I want you to ask yourself what any mother would have done. Okay, I'm working on that right now, the withdrawal of plea process. The second time that they did this to me, because it wasn't once, it was twice, I was told by the opposing counsel of my ex-husband, who had done this and organized the whole thing in the first place, very simply that if I did not hand over his two biological children, that they would take all of my children and they would make it my worst nightmare. And they did. They kept their promise. When this statement was made to me from the opposing counsel about how I needed to hand over my children, there was a protective order in place against his client that I had done everything I needed to do to get put in place in the first place. But when you're dealing with manipulators and liars and people that will do anything to further their career, like in the case of his counsel, and you're just one abuse victim trying to defend yourself against an entire system, obviously you know that doesn't work. What I know is that nobody deserves to go through what I went through. And what I know is that every single day, my son Elijah is with the man that is not there to help but to harm him. I did everything that I was supposed to do. As I learned in this community who all these players are that are connected, that keep this system running illegally the way they do against the law, aka deprivation of rights under color of law. As I began to do my research, I found that we have several problems in this community. One of those problems is the jail. There are jail deaths that are due to medical negligence because it's not a medically accredited facility and because there is a refusal to observe the rights of inmates as human beings. And so CPS and then the jail, and then I began to find that the criminal courts are not working properly either. I watched evictions after the tornado in 2021 that took place that were completely illegal. The only benefit that there was to the landlord that had received payments from FEMA or for insurance or both or whatever, that left families out on the street because then those landlords wanted to begin to raise the rent. So they had to get rid of the tenants that they couldn't raise the rent on. Okay? That is to say, my name is Christina Merrill. I want to continue to be able to work as an advocate in this community. But for my safety, I'm now having to come public and come forward and let people know what I'm dealing with. June 10th, I have a court date that deals with me paying child support to Kentucky foster care. And to say that I have all the proof of the ways that mine and my children's rights were violated, to say that I have all the proof of how Kentucky foster care failed my children, aka my A and B student children went from A and Bs to doing drugs. My daughter ended up being she ran away from foster care after she got raped and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't want to go into the details because God is God. And he's dealing with that. But what I want you to understand is that this is a way that they try and keep me silent. If you can keep parents silent by charging them child support for children that you did not legally take from them in the first place, deprivation of rights under color of law style, then you don't have any consequences to face, right? Then you never get exposed. And so, as serious as this is, I want you guys to all understand something. 4 years ago, I released a word from the Lord over this community, and I was called crazy and delusional, among other things, and that's okay. Because while I was having everything taken from me, not only my life, but then my ability to function normally as a human being for the rest of my life, and then on top of it, my children, then on top of it, my credibility, then on top of it, every chance I ever had of living a normal life, I found God. And the one thing that he made me understand was that there are more with us, aka the angels in heaven, than there are against us. I'm speaking to every single person in this community that has had their rights violated by these systems of government in Hopkins County, Kentucky. There are more with us. The forces of heaven, the host of heaven, the entire host of heaven is behind us. I encourage everyone right now to begin speaking out, because what I've learned is as long as we allow these things to continue, they're going to just continue like normal every single day. I know there have been parents that have been harmed in the family courts in ways that are despicable. I know that there are people in these criminal courts that have been illegally jailed. And then I know that there are people who have been jailed that were not treated as a human being. And for every single person that we've lost in those jails, it's time to speak up. For every human in this community that wants to live in a place where they're safe. You know, Madisonville calls itself the best town on earth, and I truly, honestly believe it has the potential to be that. But at this point, I'm worried that they're going to jail me June 10th. As I have a brain injury, I don't have the right to regulate my own body temperature, etc. That right was taken by the man that did this and then complicitly helped deprive me of my rights in these courts. I have no ability to have a properly working immune system. I have epilepsy. I pass out randomly. Believe me, there are plenty of people who know this. I was never given an opportunity because of the horrid nature of these systems to recover from my brain injury, so I have not recovered. So my physical issues have the ability, if they do illegally jail me over child support that I don't owe, to kill me. And I know that. And I'm going to say this. And then I'm going to let Madisonville do what Madisonville does, whatever that is. They can kill me if they want to. But I promise you that there are people positioned that if that happens, people are still going to be trying to keep my children safe from them. They can kill me. But there are people that I know the Lord has anointed in this place who need to understand that now is the time to speak up. There are people positioned, and I talked to a couple of them today, in places where when Madisonville decides the corruption is enough and Hostage County should be no more, it should not be Hostage County, but go back to Hopkins County, the people are positioned, the people of the Lord, to take this place back over. Even if you're not a person of the Lord, I want to put this out there to you. When your government is not keeping you safe because law enforcement, and I have to tell you there's some good ones here in Hopkins County and you know who you are, but the law enforcement that doesn't protect and serve, that harms citizens instead, when that's an issue, when there's no more justice in our courts, when the United States government is literally allowing poisons in what we eat, what we drink, When everything around us is in the condition it's in right now, I want you to understand your government has declared war on you, whether you realize that or not. If you cannot get justice according to the Constitution in the courts in the county that you live in, that's civil war. They've declared war against us. My question for everybody is, June 10th, if I go to jail and I die because of these corrupt systems and them doing what they need to do to try to silence me, and I had no help. And this question, man, I wish I could get this question to the Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice, and Andy Beshear. I've tried and I can't. This is my question for the FBI. I went and saw my agent, Mike Brown, who told me that there was a conflict of interest, so he couldn't help me because the state agencies were involved. But my question for you is this. On June 10th, if I go to jail over this child support and I die in there, what are my children going to do when they look back? What are my children going to do every single day after that without someone, aka their own mother, to fight for them? I know there are a lot of people who see me and they see how unusual I am because I do have a great faith. But I also hope that everybody knows that I have no regrets. I do not regret speaking out against the corruption in this community. I do not regret every time that I tried, able or not, to stand up for another parent in this community. I do not regret every single time I spoke out to try and assist the safety and well-being of a child when the system wouldn't do it. I do not regret being a thorn in the side of a corrupt government. In the name of Jesus, no matter what happens to me on June 10th, it is time for the floodgates to open. People need to begin to speak up. Listen, they cannot silence all of us, and there are plenty more of us than there are of them. In the name of Jesus, anyone under the sound of my voice, I ask the Lord, if you have been anointed to come against this corruption, for him to give you a spirit of boldness. I ask you to carry on my mantle and the mantle of everyone else that has tried to find justice for this place. I thank everybody that listened to this. All I can say is that if obstruction of justice is done again by Kentucky Foster Care, if my evidence is again not allowed to be submitted that I have a disability, a chronic severe traumatic disability, chronic severe traumatic brain injury, complex PTSD, and all of that was furthered and made worse by Hopkins County. If I'm silenced, I need you to understand that I have no regrets. It's time for everybody to decide today is the day. It's time for everybody to decide what kind of safety and environment we want our children living in the future. Do you want your grandchildren taken and trafficked? Do you want your children and your children's children to not be able to go through these criminal courts over a traffic ticket and still somehow manage to find justice? Do you want to have a bad day and end up in jail? Which is the right, by the way, of just about anybody. Everybody's allowed to have a bad day. But do you want to have a bad day and end up in jail and then end up dead? Because there is no accountability in this place at all. It's time to vote different. It's time to think about what we're leaving our children. In the name of Jesus, I ask anybody to pray for me that is willing to do so. I thank everybody for their time, and I hope you have a good day.